Okay, hello. It's Lisa Starr with the StarrCast Podcast, and I'm here today with my guest, Mia Kyricos. Everyone knows Mia, but for those new listeners who maybe don't, Mia is the founder and president of Kyricos and Associates, a consulting firm based in York, Maine, but her path has been all over the globe, and I'll invite Mia to tell us about that. Thanks for joining us, Mia.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I am honored to be on StarrCast. It's
Oh,
very exciting.
it's exciting for me too. So, Mia, I've had the luck to visit you in your home state, your beautiful home state, and where you grew up. And I understand that your journey began in family businesses that were hospitality oriented. Could you tell us about that?
Sure. Yes, I grew up in a very resort-driven town. Our season, if I'm being gracious, is like between May and October. So at the age of 14, I was working in restaurants, leading up to hotels and others on the happy coast of Maine. So I've done everything from being a takeout girl to scooping ice cream to dining room manager to a club manager, um, a server for many years. I mean, everything you can think about in food and beverage and hospitality. It's really where I got my love of service. But I also say I was born this way because I'm Greek, and my
Ah,
big fat Greek family is
uh-huh.
very hospitable. You're eating or drinking the minute you come in the door, whether you're a friend, a relative, or a stranger.
Right.
So,
Italians are similar, so I'm familiar
yes.
with that.
Exactly. So yeah, I grew up in this wonderful, beautiful part of the world, and it really gave me my love of service.
No surprise that you were a manager before you left home at 18. I mean, some people just have it. So you left Maine for college.
Yes, I did. I ended up, my last role in Maine was as general manager of a family restaurant. So, of course, I think that's a Greek rite of passage. You have to be in the food and beverage industry. But then I went to Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts, and got my degree in international relations. And it sort of gave me my taste for looking at the world outside of our own. Boundaries and borders, if you will. I spent a year abroad in Brussels where I learned the power of a passport and a really good train system
Uh-huh.
and traveled all through Europe. And it really was a pivotal time for me because I think I learned, looking back, because hindsight's always 2020, um, that the love of learning other cultures and what it means to be a global citizen. I got a taste of that really young. And also, my mom, I'm a daughter of an immigrant, Greek immigrant. And so, really looking at the world outside of the four walls of the United States has been something instilled in me at a young age.
When
So,
you went to college, did you plan, did was majoring in international relations the plan as a freshman, or did you sort of fall into that?
It was my plan as a freshman. I was struggling because I loved business. I really did, but I had to choose between a liberal arts degree and a
Uh-huh.
business degree, and everyone was saying go business, go business. But I was so fascinated by the world and I mean, inspired by my own mother's, voyage from the old country on the boat and all these things and the fact that we talked to relatives there and other relatives that went to Australia. And I just think I learned at a young age that there was more to the world than just the country we lived in. And so I intentionally looked for um, a degree in international relations, and it was more inspiring to me than just traditional business, at least in my undergrad.
Right.
So.
So you came out of college, and what happened next?
I It's really funny. I thought, as a 22-year-old woman, that on top of the world, when you graduate from college, I thought I was going to go like learn Arabic and solve the Middle East crisis. That's what you do with an international relations degree. And then when I started applying to nonprofits in DC to sort of fuel that quest, I learned the reality of a nonprofit salary and having been steeped in debt because
Mm.
I have a twin sister and Um, so I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't going to pay off my school loans
Mm.
solving the Middle East crisis. And
Right.
so I quickly ended up shifting my focus and moved to DC. I temped for a little while and I
Oh,
worked in a pizza parlor because that's what you do when
sure.
you're trying to pay bills, and ended up joining a .com at a time when no one knew what the heck a .com was. It
Right.
was like 1997. And I joined in PR, marketing, and communications in-house for the company. And this is where I say I really learned my functional expertise in an
Mm.
industry that I ultimately didn't really like,
Mm-hmm.
technology and so forth. Um, but I grew rapidly in that field because .com world was just needed so much more talent than was available. So they hired people and gave us more responsibility than we ever should have had. And I ended up becoming the right hand woman to the CMO,
Mm.
who used to be from Coca-Cola,
Wow.
and learned everything about sort of the world. And we had offices around the world. And I started really loving the work I was doing. I just didn't love the industry I was in.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back, I say it was the time in my life where I learned just as much about what I did not want to do or the field I did not want to be in as much as the work that I loved doing. And I had my favorite boss of all time was
Mm.
actually in an industry I didn't love.
But that's so key, right? For the
Hmm.
experience, because you come out of college without a really super clear sense of, okay, what's the next step? And right place, right time. Maybe you just got into something that was booming at the right moment. And of course, being the uber talent that you are, you zoomed up. And so, what happened when you left DC? Where was the next step?
Well, I knew I always wanted to go back to school. And I will tell people one little tip I would tell to your listeners, because I know they're looking at sort of your guests for inspiration for their own future paths. And the reality is, um, it only looks good in the rear view mirror
Mm.
because you graduate at the top of your class with a great GPA and you name it. And if you have a history of success or not success, there's no roadmap. And it's almost like starting over
Mm-hmm.
after 12 years of being in school. Anyways, after the 4 years of being in the .com, I knew I wanted to go back. Now I was ready to get that business degree.
Mm.
And everything I ever dreamt of doing was back in the hospitality world. And I got some great advice from my boss at the time
Mm.
because I was going to apply for an MBA at all the Ivy Leagues, right? That's what I was going to do.
Right.
And he says to me, Mia, don't underestimate the power of the experience you have in a super fast growing industry in a function that you like. You can take that functional expertise, and it's always important, whether it's marketing, HR, finance, have some level of expertise and map back to your industry of choice. So he said, if you can get into the number one school you want to get into, great. If you can't or you don't for some reason, then take that expertise and go apply for like a marketing job in the industry of hospitality. Go work for Amex Travel or a hotel or whatever. And I pass this on because it was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got.
Mm.
I just happened to get into the school I wanted to. So the next step was going to Cornell, where I knew I wanted an MBA, but I wanted it for the world of service. And I got my master's of management and hospitality, which is ultimately an MBA for service versus an MBA for manufacturing, is really what that
Or
comes down to.
accounting or whatever, right?
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
And at that
Um,
time, there weren't many schools that had that program, were there?
no, no. And you know what I really understood is Cornell's school is called sort of the hotel school, right? And they also have the Johnson School. But the hotel school is really about anything from service. So think of consulting, food and beverage,
Hmm.
hotels, gaming, anything from a service industry perspective. And so I went there, and this was sort of a second transformational moment for me because I enrolled, borrowed about $100,000,
Wow.
which is a whole other thing, in 2001,
A lot of money.
and a lot of money, and added to my undergrad debt, which I still had. And I enrolled the first week of September 2001, which
Oh,
was
wow.
9/11. And here I went a week into class. And once I got through the astonishing humanity of it all and dealing with classmates of mine who had lost family members, it was
Wow.
really a riveting moment. I started freaking out
Mm.
because I thought I just borrowed all this money for an industry that's going to be dead. And
Right.
what
Wow.
am I going to do? Um, and I got my second best piece of advice, which was, Mia, now is the time to better align your personal interests with your professional goals. You just came
Mm.
out of the dot-com industry that sort of exploded in the stock market. And, how do you want to live your life, not just what you do and what you do for work? And that's ultimately what led me to Spawn Wellness.
Mhm. So you're at school at Cornell and you're taking classes in hospitality management.
Mhm.
There wasn't really a spa orientation at the time, was there?
Well, there was one class. There was one class that was really called the History of Spas. And I almost forgot this. The other class that was also led by the same professor,
Mm.
who you and I both know, um, Professor Emeritus now, Dr. Mary Tabaki. Um, she also taught this other class that was called Wellness for the Workplace or something like that. A new field, which was really ahead of its time, even more ahead of its time than I would say the spa side. But it was this one class, and it was sort of the history of destination spas and health resorts in the world. And of course, I knew the world of hospitality. But in my mind, once I read the curriculum summary, I thought, wow, this is my opportunity
Mm.
to not just live well, but help others live well. And I learned about the world of integrative health and wellness. So it wasn't just about getting your nails done, although for some people that was a path. It was really about this intersection between Eastern and Western medicine, not the curriculum, but as I learned about the histories of
Mm.
spa and wellness, that was something that came to life for me. So that was the start.
And
And
Mary's
I've
background was nutrition, right? Didn't
her
she? Yeah.
background, yeah, exactly. Her background was nutrition. And I basically walked into her office. I will tell you this, I'll never forget this sweet little firecracker of a woman, as we all know.
Mm.
And she's teaching this class. Her background was nutrition. And all of my classmates, for the most part, had grown up in hospitality operations. And I was this weirdo that had
Mm.
4 years in this dot-com world that no one knew about, but working in marketing, PR, and communications. And she saw my background and I said, look, this is what I want to do. I've worked in hotels, restaurants, private clubs. I've never worked in the spa and wellness space, but for some reason I feel like this is my calling
Mhm.
to help people live well. And she looked at my background and she said, how would you like to be my graduate assistant?
Wow.
And that's what ended up happening. So I joked that for 2 years I worked around the clock and slept about 4 hours a night because I wasn't just taking on the course load, but
Mhm.
I was working with Mary on different projects that she was doing consultatively for the industry. And she
Mhm.
opened my world to this whole network. And so started my path.
Amazing. It's great. It's a great example of what happens when you knock on doors sometimes and you just put yourself out there, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And I didn't know, here what I thought was sort of a handicap, if you will, because I'd spent 4 years out of the industry. To her and later others, it was actually a
Mm.
differentiating factor
Right.
because I had this very timely business experience that I could apply back to an industry that I loved. And so, like I said, hindsight's literally 2020 now, and it was a huge game changer for me because there weren't a lot of people that wanted to at all be part of this world. And in fact, I was somewhat, in many ways, with my classmates, a bit of a freak because
Mhm.
I was like this wellness warrior in a school of hospitality
Hospitality
experts.
nerds, right?
Exactly, exactly.
So what was the first job that you got after graduating from Cornell?
Well, this is a funny one, Lisa. The first job everyone was getting their lovely salary offers and going on the corporate side for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt from a credibility standpoint, I needed to work in operations in the spa and wellness center. So the
Right.
first job I had was taking over the flagship Exhale Mind Body Spa in New York City and helped to open the second one. There's now about 24 properties, but
Mm-hmm.
that was my first job, and I was the spa director. And I did that I had a year contract, and I moved. I was in Manhattan doing that, and it was a sort of a day spa with destination spa programming. So we didn't
Right.
just provide massages and nails and all of that. We also provided nutrition counseling and teeth whitening and lifestyle coaching and a whole other world that I learned. So that was my first job, and after that first year, I will tell you, I networked. Mary taught me the power of networking. I was not afraid to show up at iSpa, the International Spa
Mm-hmm.
Association, during the course of my time at Cornell in that first year to volunteer. I stuffed T-shirts into
Mm-hmm.
bags, and I helped do that. And so along the way with that first job was also going to trade shows, connecting with people for coffee and tea, and
Sure.
just learning about the industry, not just the business experience, but practically from people in the space.
That's really good advice, Mia, because you've got 4 years of undergrad and a prestigious degree in graduate school, and yet, we still always need to learn.
Absolutely. And from a credibility standpoint, I will tell you, as you know, and your listeners will soon know, um, this experience ended up being pivotal for me because it gave me credibility to be able to take on corporate roles because
Mhm.
I had walked in the shoes of spa directors, and before that, front desk agents and dining room managers and restaurant managers and so forth. So that gave me some street cred when it came to working with general managers and
Mhm.
RVPs of multinational corporations.
For sure, it would be difficult to go into corporate without having run the
Right.
location. So you had a role at Starwood. You were there for a long time,
Yes.
and you
And
created a lot of brands in that time, right?
yes, and I will tell you, it was a nice marriage of some of my marketing experience from before, and then now the industry that I loved. At Starwood, I was there for 8 years. You're right. I first joined as the number two to the vice president of spa and wellness, and eventually ended up being the global director of the division, and developed 6 international spa brands for major hotel brands like Westin, Sheraton, St.
Mhm.
Regis, W Hotels, and others. And I did that for 8 years. And once I completed my final brand, I was at this crossroads. Do I stay at a company that I loved, and perhaps apply that methodology to another function of hospitality like food and beverage, which was an offer to me at the time?
Mm.
Or do I go to a place where the core business is health and wellness?
Mm.
And instead of just heads and beds, which is a beautiful part of the hotel industry, but that's their core. And
Sure.
I took a risk and was recruited out to a company called, at the time, Core Performance and Athletes Performance, but it's now called Exos.
Hmm.
Um, and they were experts in human performance, training people along the categories of nutrition, mindset, movement, recovery. But the world's biggest athletes, your NBA, your PGA, your NFL, your Olympian,
What fun.
um, yeah, so the Brazilian soccer teams, the um, preparing tennis players for the US Open and so forth. These guys were known for training the world's best athletes, but also elite military and others. And
Hmm.
they came to me because they were looking for someone with a hospitality background that could take the philosophy that enabled professional athletes to earn millions of dollars a year, but to repackage it and bring it to the campuses of Fortune 500 companies in this little known field at the time called workplace wellness.
Wow. Way ahead of their
So,
time for sure.
way ahead of their time. So now, shifting from hospitality, where it was really sort of a nice to have, not a need to have, to workplaces where increasingly uh, colleagues were getting unwell because of how we work, the Western philosophy of work, which we've not made a lot of progress on, but working 24/7 in a highly connected, never sleep society. And the cost of that to employers in the world started to just increase. And
Mm-hmm.
those were the early days of just trying to reduce their healthcare costs with this little thing called wellness.
Mm-hmm.
So my job was really bringing performance trainers, nutritionists, um, and others, and a huge technology platform to companies like Google and Intel and State Street Bank and others, and really learned a whole new area of this $1 trillion economy now known as wellness.
So you brought that all back to New York for Spa Finder for a
Yes,
time and got their brand
yes.
all sorted out.
Yes, as chief brand officer at Spa Finder, and eventually enabled their sale
Mm-hmm.
to another firm. And that's when I decided to hang my own shingle,
Right.
if you will. That's when I started realizing, if you looked at the trends in the marketplace, whether it was hospitality, trying to look at spa and wellness both within and outside the four walls of spa, fitness, pool, to other things, to companies that were trying to come up with a wellness strategy for mostly for their colleagues, to entities that were trying to figure out, hey, we want to play in this space and offer
Mm-hmm.
products and services. How do we do that?
Mm.
And that's when Kyricos and Associates was launched, and we called ourselves strategic advisors for wellness, tourism, um, and hospitality, and healthy lifestyle companies. And that just sort of opened a whole new world to me.
And you were booming along until you got that once in a lifetime offer that you couldn't
Yes.
turn down.
Yes, which was at Hyatt Hotels. And so I spent about a year talking with Hyatt back and forth, and I assumed it was for a consulting engagement. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
after all, that's what I was doing. I was
Right.
advising C-suites on their wellness strategies around the world. And lo and behold, I was quite surprised that instead what they asked me for was to join their senior leadership team as
Mm-hmm.
um, senior vice president and global head of well-being at Hyatt. And everyone was like, well, what does that mean? Is that like your Starwood job?
Mm-hmm.
And it was real evidence about how far the industry has come. And really, the scope of work was to come and identify what wellness and well-being means for Hyatt globally, a $5 billion company with 1,000 hotels around the globe, but to do so both commercially, so at their hotels and between hotel stays, and also internally for 130,000 colleagues around the globe
Wow,
in
that's a lot
partnership
of
with the
people.
chief HR officer. So it was a huge opportunity, but the first time a hospitality company, and I give Hyatt a lot of credit, looked to prioritize health and wellness across its brands, not just one brand like we did with Weston at Starwood, but across their brands and both internally and externally. And that was a game changer, not just for hospitality, but I would say big business at large, that suddenly was starting to prioritize wellness and well-being for their colleagues as well in a much more meaningful way than they had, you know, 8, 9 years prior when I was at Exos.
Funny, interesting circle that you end up being, the head of a company that owns Exhale where you started, really.
Oh, that was amazing. And Exhale ended up reporting to me,
Mm-hmm.
which was just sort of ironic. And I felt like what a blessing, what Ann Beth Eschbach and Julia Sutton had founded. Um, for me, I just saw myself as a friend at corporate that could help further their goals because they
Right.
deserve all the credit for that brand. And then also Miraval, which was ironic
Mm-hmm.
because during my first year, between my first year and second year of grad school, thanks to Mary Tabaki, I actually worked for Canyon Ranch Health Resorts and lived at Canyon Ranch in the Berkshires. And so it was funny to come full circle that our number one competitor now was one that we owned at Hyatt.
Right.
So you're right, the world of wellness is so small, and I really did feel like it was a calling because it had all come full circle.
Well, here we are. 2020 happens. We've all pushed the reset button. Kyricos and Associates is going booming again. I think you're really focused, from what I'm understanding, on wellness communities and living. I mean, what do you see in the next 5 years happening for us in the wellness space?
I think each one of the bubbles that we talk about, which thanks to the Global Wellness Institute, that produces all the research and sizes each one of these bubbles, from nutrition to physical activity to real estate, workplace wellness, wellness tourism, and so forth. I see uh, a, a deepening and a broadening of each one of those segments. This isn't slowing down anytime soon. COVID has just served as a catalyst for the business of wellness and well-being. And I think particularly anything that's technology driven, I think that's going to be huge. I think people are shifting their focus to not just be places they visit for an hour in the middle of a day or a week if they're lucky at a
Mm,
health resort. They're looking about where they live. So real estate will be huge. I think we're getting much smarter about what we put in our body and what
mhm.
that means, and the microbiome. There's so many different fields that are exploding. And I think the conversations that we've tried to have about living and leading and being well, both at work and in life in our communities, has just been put on warp speed because we've been reminded of our mortality, not unlike we did in 9/11, and the importance more than anything of our health, that's truly the only wealth in the world, and it's leveled the playing field globally. And that's exciting for all of us, I
It
think.
is. It is when I think back on for how long we've been talking about having consumers take a hold of their wellness journey and being responsible. And yes, it's great to go to the spa for the afternoon or a destination spa for a week, but then you come back and your life, if you go back to what you did, you dipped your toe in the water, but we're seeing that consumers are saying, sitting up and saying, oh, okay, I get it now. I need to go to the gym. I need to eat right. I need to take walks. I need to do things for myself and my mental state.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail on the head. At the end of the day, the business we're in is ultimately prevention, and it's ensuring our longevity for years to come. And I think we all have the power, with a lot less red tape. If you
Mm.
look at the medical community, we have the power to help people live longer, richer, happier lives. We have the power to help people live as young as possible, as long as possible, and it's a real privilege. And I think we need more people to help carry this work forward and to partner with medical fields and others. And I've never been more bullish than I am on the business of wellness and well-being, than I am today. And I'm grateful for COVID in many ways for serving as that catalyst. And I'm grateful to you and entities like StarrCast that are bringing these conversations to light, because we need as much help as we can get.
Well, that's very generous of you. We're grateful to people like you who have blazed the trail for so many behind you and will continue to do so. I'm going to close with two quick questions, Mia. Number one, what's one thing looking back you wish you had known when you graduated from Wheaton? Is there anything that would have helped you along your journey?
Um, I wish, uh, in looking back, I wish that people focused more not just on being successful, but the realities of failure too.
Mm.
Um, that when I look back at the most pivotal times of when I stumbled, it actually propelled me into something better, and I just had to trust it. And so I think we all have preconceived notions of what's going to happen the day after graduation. And I think the reality of the world is that you still need to put your hard work in, and you still need to be respectful and be kind. And there's really no free trips. It's everyone has to put their work in some way. And so I wish, in looking back, that I was a little kinder and trusting the process and
Mhm.
had a more flexible, open mind as I do now.
Well, we can say that with the advantage of our years, right? We always look
Yes.
back and because you're in such a hurry when you're younger and but we've learned that failing up is a thing, right? You learn from that as long as you don't make the same mistake again. It's good.
ex- exactly. And I think if we are caught up in less of the woulda coulda shouldas and more about where we are, we'll enjoy the process much more.
My second and last question, Mia, is you're known for baking. What's your favorite thing to bake when you're not working?
I love to bake a really good pie. I'm sort of known for my fruit pies, but I make all different kinds. And I also have found a knack for catering to all the folks in my family that happen to be gluten-free or gluten sensitive.
Mm.
So I just love making a pie with the world's freshest ingredients, and
And
especially a good Maine
yeah,
blueberry.
I was going to say it has to be Maine blueberries.
Exactly.
Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I hope we have shared some inspiration today and look forward to seeing you in person again sometime this year.
Me too. Thanks so much, Lisa. And thanks to everyone for listening.